Well, welcome to the Sean Trey Show. I have an awesome guest with me today. Would you like to tell people who you are and what you do?
My name is Tanner Mitchell. I produce houseplant content. I also have a houseplant store here where we live in our hometown, Prosper, Texas. I run that with my wife, Erica.
That's awesome. No. How did you find this path?
You know, it really all started. Plants have been around me forever. My dad has had a huge garden. Growing up in Oregon, he had a huge garden. We had a ton of houseplants, my grandma, great-grandma. It's always been a part of, my upbringing and my childhood. They're always around.
Yeah.
And I moved to Texas about 12 years ago.
Okay.
And growing up in Oregon and then coming over to Texas was quite a bit of a shock for a lot of reasons. But one of the things that I was missing the most were the mountains. I don't know if you've ever been to Oregon, but it's very mountainous. There are tons of mountains.
Yeah.
And then here where I am in North Texas now, it's flat as a pancake. I mean, coming out of my neighborhood, I can see 12 different water towers from different areas and different towns and stuff. It is flat.
Wow.
So I began to bring in some of those houseplants that I was familiar with growing up, just to try to have a little bit of home. And I also decorate in our home. So I wanted to bring in some nice plants for that. But I was really frustrated with the lack of clear information around houseplants. When you go online and you search for, how do you take care of this plant or that, there's conflicting information. And I thought it was really weird that, humans have been taking care of plants for hundreds, if not thousands of years.
Yeah.
And how, after all that time, do we not have very clear and concise information? How are we still conflicting information after all that time, So I set out to kind of do my own research, come up with my own methods, things that were much easier to understand. And I started to share these things online, not really I didn't have a goal of, producing any following or whatever. It was just like, it's kind of like a journal. I don't know. It was a journal sort of for me. I've always used social media as a journal of sorts. My dad has kept a journal since he was 25. He's written 2 pages every day since he was 25, and he's in his 60s now. So the importance of a journal has kind of stayed with me, and I suppose that's what it was. But anyway, people liked the content so much, and things began to grow.
That's awesome.
That's awesome. Yeah. And so, here we are several years later and just still putting out information that hopefully helps people keep their houseplants alive. It's really what we do.
There's 2 things there that I really would like to touch on and kind of unpack. The first thing is using social media as a journal is a really interesting concept. And there was I can't remember his name right now, but the gentleman, Stephen something, who does the Diary of the CEO podcast. Essentially, when he started out with that podcast, it was simply his diary that he was working off of. And he was working off of this idea of this is what he's working on right now. And he was processing certain things. And then that content that he was processing became his podcast. And so it was not that he was essentially, obviously he was trying to make content, but he was making stuff that applied to him. And people found it extremely personable, extremely relatable, because it was stuff that was just real. And that's one of the things that to me has always been some of the best content that I've ever consumed is stuff that is, first of all, informative, like what you are saying. This is the other side. It's amazing that we do not have a clear a clear outline. And you think about the change in accessibility to information. If you wanted to find information about a houseplant 25 years ago, 30 years ago, you had to trek to the local library and hope that there was a book on general, plant care, and you forget about even trying to look at something more specialized. I mean, that was I think that was how I found you. I was browsing on Instagram, and suddenly I was like, there was this video about how to care for an orchid, and you were showing cutting away these orchid leaves. The I believe that it was an orchid, pulling off the husk that the orchid had been grown in. And I was just like, who knew? Like, literally, like, who knew? I've been trying to raise orchids forever. And, they always come in that husk and such. And then, I had one orchid that was just needed to be rejuvenated. And it was surviving outside without me doing anything. And then suddenly I went to check on it, and I was like, oh, wow, this plant needs to be repotted. And I was like, but how? I don't know. And so I started going online and looking. Now, there was a million different ideas about how to replant an orchid. And it was so simple, the video you put forward. And I was like, why is there not more content like this? And so that kind of struck me. So those are two really interesting points. First of all, the ease of access to information, and how, what you've created is so much more simple. And the second being, it's really interesting to see that this is kind of your diary, your journal of sorts.
Yeah, it really blew my mind as well, that there was just not a clear approach. You go to watch these different videos and instructional things, and it's a 12, 15, sometimes 20-minute video.
Right.
But when you break down the actual nuts and bolts of what you need, it's minutes long.
Yeah.
And I think, my family, my wife and I, we've all experienced the benefits of keeping plants around us. It's well studied, it's well known. Even without science, it's very easy to understand that relationship that we have with plants. I think it's really ingrained in us. And it's just so interesting that nobody has come along and said, this is how you do it. I don't really care about the whys so much. I want people to be able to experience that joy that we get from houseplants. And I think the more complicated we make it, the more information we stack on top to inflate our own egos, saying I'm smarter than you because I know that this plant comes from this region, and there's this humidity, and there's this and this and this.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah. That's not going to help me keep my orchid alive in Prosper, Texas, knowing that they grow in Asia and South America. Doesn't matter. So, but when we do that, we make it seem more complicated than it is. And then most people throw in the towel. They say, well, I got to have my household humidity at what?
Yeah.
I got to get a humidifier now. I got to do this. I got to do that. I'll get a fake plant, or I won't get any at all. And they miss out on all the benefits that are houseplants. So why not cut out all that information? This is the view of the sky that it needs. If you look down at your orchid or your plant, and it can't see this amount of sky, it's not going to do well.
Yeah.
Water your plant when it's this dry. Here's how to test when it's this dry. Repot it in this type of material and make sure you have drainage. 99% of house care is 4 basic principles. And you're going to be successful with hundreds, thousands of plants with just a few basic principles. So why not just show people how easy it can be with just the basics? I don't care if people think I'm smart or not. It's about letting them or teaching them these principles very basically, just what they need to be happy with it, to keep a couple of plants around their house alive.
Yeah.
And you can do that in just a couple minutes. And so that's sort of really what we set out to do. But yeah, I think social media should be used as a journal as well, to get to your other point.
Yeah.
And I think whether we know it or not, it is. My wife is really good about that. She posts on Facebook and Instagram every day. She's not looking for a following, But gosh, everybody has great, they have Facebook memories now.
Yeah.
Every time they pop up, with all these different memories. Oh, yeah, look, remember when we did so-and-so? We should do that again for Christmas. That parade was fantastic. Whatever it is. I mentioned my dad earlier, keeping a journal for the past, I think it's almost 50 years now. And 2 pages a day for 50 years, at least 2 pages a day for 50 years.
That's amazing.
That's a lot of information to consume once he passes that we're going to have to go through. Not going to have to, but you know what I mean? That's just like the longest novel of all time.
Yeah.
And so this is sort of a modern, easy way, quick snippets to get an idea of a person's life, sharing photos as well.
Mm-hmm.
And it's free. Anyway, I just think it's a great way to account for what's going on in the day-to-day. And you were talking about earlier how this guy's podcast, I'm sorry, I forgot the name, and I'm not familiar with the podcast, but how he's just sharing a little snippet of his life. And I think I have a very strong opinion that the mundane, the everyday average person sharing that is, I think, the highest form of art, because that's how everybody is. That's the regular. I don't care what a TV star is doing. It couldn't bore me anymore. I want to know what the truck driver is doing at the gas station at 10 o'clock at night. Like, what's he thinking about? What's he doing? What does his life look like, and why? How did he get there?
Right.
There's so much interest in the day-to-day average person, and I'm really fascinated by that.
There was that's why I absolutely love Mike Rowe's Dirty Jobs. I love that show, and I've always loved that because
he's great.
It's amazing because you sit there and think about, like what you were saying about the truck driver. Like, God, I would love to film a documentary behind what it would be like for just one trip for a long haul trucker. What does it look like to drive from Florida to Seattle and to carry cargo, across that region? I don't know if that's a route that people would actually take, or whether that's, they're going to be more regional in a different area. But what would it look like to just go on one of these long haul routes? And things like, what are people eating? I remember like some of those big trucks that they have like the double bed in the back. I remember that once that we were driving at a truck stop. My dad was this awesome guy who would always talk to everyone. My mom hated it. My dad was like, hey, let's go talk to these people. And we saw this one husband-wife couple that had this truck that had a queen-size bed in the back. I mean, it was just one of these huge, massive trucks and huge, massive tractor trailers. And they were like, hey, come take a look. And they had a small kitchenette behind there. It was just insane. It was like a house, it was like a tractor trailer RV. And they essentially spent 90% of their time in that truck. Like, what would that be like? What do people get to see? What does the sunrise look like over the mountains of New Mexico? What is it like to wake up in Cape Cod in the middle of winter time? I mean, these are different things that this couple has experienced doing what they do. And that's magical. It's absolutely magical, but it's magical in the mundane, because what we take for granted, what we take as just absolutely, normal might be extraordinary to someone else. One example, I live in Vietnam, and every time I'm driving home, I've been here on and off over 21 years now, almost 22. Not solid, but on and off over that long of a period of time. I know this country well. There are little things that I know extremely well that would be daunting to someone else. How do you cross the road in Vietnam? Now, there's an art to it. And when people come here, they don't know how to do it. People think that you need to kind of dash in front and dash across where there's an opening, or just move quickly. The reality is that's the worst thing you could do. All you have to do is raise your hand, step out, and move slowly through traffic. They will miss you. Everyone will go around you as long as they can see you. If you're moving steadily through traffic, you're okay. That does not apply to buses or large vehicles. You get out of the way of those, but you generally tend to wait while they're moving, and you just move slowly. And then when you get to the other side, you got to look this way and just keep moving slowly. It's literally like crossing the Red Sea or something. It's terrifying. You have the ocean on either side, traffic on either side. But to me, it's in no way daunting because I've been there. I've experienced it. In a simple video like how to cross the street in Vietnam, it might seem to me like, no one's going to want to watch that. No one would want to pay attention to that. But it might be information that someone's like, oh my God, honey, we found it. We almost got run over today. Here it is. Here's the video. It's online. Yeah, someone did it on YouTube. And like that simple experience is what's so powerful, because we all, and this is what I love about social media, it's an opportunity to teach. Social media is an opportunity to share experience, and our experience might be absolutely invaluable to someone else. And that's what I love about what you're doing. You have experience and you're trying to make it easier for people.
It should be easy and it should be enjoyable. Gardening, I think, is one of those hobbies that you can benefit from for a lifetime.
Yeah.
You can do it when you're 3. You can do it when you're 100. It doesn't really matter. It's very low impact. Can be very meditative. There are so many avenues that you can take. Gardening, food, house plants, bonsai. There's so much art that's involved with it. There's so much meditation that can go with it. There's just tons of benefits to it. But that video that you're talking about with the how to cross the street in Vietnam, that's a great video. Right. I'm telling you, that sort of stuff is so interesting because it's so basic. Well, you just walk across a crosswalk. That's what we would think in the United States. You should push the button, wait for it to tell you to walk, and then you walk across. So that would be a good catcher. And this is why I say watching the average, quote unquote, mundane day-to-day life of somebody in a different place than you are is so highly valuable. But most of social media is people just following famous people that are posting their latest purchase or some big trip that they're on at a resort. It's whatever. It's a travesty, I think, that never in the world have we been more connected, more ease of access to information, but we still inundate ourselves with junk. Largely, when we could be watching how to cross the street in Vietnam. Even if I'll never go to Vietnam, I want to know how to do it. It's extremely fascinating to me of just the difference. And I think it's, I don't know if that has anything to do with the culture, but when I think of Vietnam, I think of careful attention. I think of attentive people. I think of neat people. And so that plays into perfectly to where it's not like you're trying to cross the street in New York City and it's like a game of Frogger, Someone might hit you with their car. They might, they don't care. They don't care about you. But, then maybe over in Vietnam, they're a little bit more careful and attentive, and you just raise your hand and walk slowly across. I think that's perfect. How perfect.
Yeah. And see, and that's, really like that. It's right. And there is this, then again, and that's one of the things, like I had this discussion recently with someone about social media as well. And they're like, social media is such this person was not vibing on social media, and they were really unhappy with the general state of media in the world. Like, why? This is so much junk out there. There's so much things, I don't want to see what this person is doing and that person's doing. And I was like, well, are you contributing to social media? Are you trying to make it better? Are you trying to fill in this? Whether you like social media or not, there is content that's going to be created. And that's what I try to tell people is I want to do my bit to, let's imagine that there's a pond in front of us that represents all of the data that's kind of being shared on the internet and in different media platforms. And everyone has like a dropper that's, dropping into the ocean. And people go, oh, I can't make a difference. I can't make a difference. Well, you might be able to. You actually might. You just don't believe it. It's not about having one drop that is going to be the thing that changes the ocean. But if you leave enough drops, if you put enough out there, and the people around you are going to start seeing what you drop into the ocean, and they're going to start dropping things of a similar nature. And then we start to make this bigger change. There was this story about the monkeys in the mountains of northern Japan. And so the monkeys in the mountains of northern Japan have this very interesting behavior. They get into the hot springs. They soak themselves. All right. Well, up until I believe the 60s or 70s, the monkeys never did that. The monkeys were normal monkeys. And in the brutally cold winters of Japan, they would just huddle in the mountains to stay out of the cold. Well, the tourists that came to the mountains of northern Japan were seeking out the natural hot springs because the hot springs were just absolutely beautiful. It's freezing cold out. It's snow that's, 3, 5 to 5, 6, 7, 8 feet deep. And these people would, trudge into these hot springs in the middle of winter and soak and then get out and be like, oh yeah, this was a fun experience. There was some of the groups of monkeys in southern Japan started watching these tourists, seeing them trudge into these waters. And suddenly the monkeys were like, hey, this water's hot. And so suddenly there was just like this zeitgeist amongst the monkeys, and all the monkeys they started getting in across Japan. So now if you go online and you type, snow monkeys snoking in hot springs in northern Japan, you'll see all these photos of these monkeys that just lounge in these super hot waters all winter. They just soak in the water mountain of northern Japan. A few tourists that traveled to these remote regions shifted the behavior of an entire species. And they didn't realize that they were going to have that effect, yet it did.
It's wild.
It's wild, right? And we are in a digital version of that. Now, is what you're helping us shift towards positive or negative? Is the content that people are creating a net positive or net negative? And judging whether something's positive or negative can be. There's a lot of that's tricky because we can't see the entirety of time in the future, understandably.
And it's subjective anyway.
Yeah, it's subjective. But is what you're creating helping make people feel good? That's kind of how I like to look at it. Is it something that can give people joy with their time? That's awesome. And the other thing that you were talking about, it's about giving people access to information they might not know that they want. I wasn't searching for how to repot an orchid, but I found that and I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. I needed this. And it was something that popped up and gave me useful information. And then suddenly you have a follower or subscriber. You have a person who's now consuming content on the regular, which is awesome.
The biggest thing, and to your point about the pond analogy, I didn't know when I first started that I'd have any sort of a ripple effect. They talk about that ripple effect where you're contributing your little dropper of information, and you don't know how far widespread it is. All I knew was that I couldn't believe how, when I started to figure out houseplants, when I started to realize how easy it was, I didn't understand why other people had such a hard time with it. And it's not that I'm skilled. And again, no green thumbs. I don't believe in green thumbs. Sure, my dad had plants and all that, but the information that he was giving me was not very good. It was all personal experience based, for his specific location and environment, et cetera, et cetera. I had no idea what it was going to do, not only for the community, the houseplant community, just people in general wanting to keep a few plants alive, but how it was going to change my life as well. When I started making these videos, I had a whole other job, a whole other career path that I was going down. It made such a huge effect that it changed the whole course of my life and my family's life, because there was so much gratitude for the information I was putting out. People were messaging me on Instagram. I think you found me on Instagram, but my largest following is actually on TikTok.
Yeah.
And people were so grateful. They would say, can I tip you somehow? Or do you have any plants to buy? I'm like, well, no, these are mine, but, and that's why we opened the plant store. We had another small business together as well before, the plant shop. But it's funny how when you just start contributing where things can go and what can change. And the best part really is, all these people, we get messages every day or comments every day. People who have always wanted to keep houseplants, usually orchids. I am really well known for the orchid care videos we put out. But because of you, I can keep an orchid alive now, or I can keep my houseplants alive. Or, my mom passed last year, and I had these funeral plants, these plants from her funeral, and they were struggling. I didn't want them to die, and because of your videos, they're now thriving and beautiful, and so on and so forth. So it doesn't take a whole lot of effort on my part to make such a big change in other people's lives.
Right.
And so I like that dropper analogy that you have. You just never know. And why not contribute a little bit? It's fun. You never know what you're going to do for somebody else by just putting forth a little bit of your experience, a little bit of effort. And at the end of the day, if nobody cares about it, maybe your kids will care about it one day when you're dead and they can watch your videos or whatever. There's at least some entertainment factor.
I earlier in my life was taught for a long time. When I first moved to Vietnam, I was teaching English. And there were students that I had, I've taught a bunch of different people English over the years. And one of the things that was interesting to me is, there are obviously the people you remember, the students that were loud and boisterous and, I remember that guy. Sadly, there's also the students that I didn't remember, the students who sat in the back of the classroom and were kind of quiet. And to each their own, they were all learning. They were all great. And I often will sit there and think, what? I really made a difference for this kid or that kid, the people that pop into my head, But you don't realize the impact that you're having on some people that just sit there quietly and take it in. And then that person might be positively affected by what you put out there and change something else. We do not know in life what seeds we are planting that will have an effect on a larger group of people. And I love, again, that the analogy or the story that you talk about, the woman who possibly had the plants from her mother's funeral or something like that, that simple act of you sharing a video that could help this person could have this, butterfly effect that really starts transforming the lives of other people. I love how positive information is contagious almost. It spreads in this beautiful way. And yet the same is true for negativity. What are you planting? What seeds are you planting in your life, in your media, in your information? And do you give them room to grow?
It's definitely something to think about. It's funny that you mentioned that about the funeral plants. By the way, that's a comment that we get almost every day.
Really?
A message or a comment, something along those lines. It's very common here in the States to get plants from a loved one's funeral. It's really very
Okay.
common. And I've often thought about, because I take it back. Okay, I got into plants. I was comfortable getting my first plant because I grew up with them, because my dad had them, my grandma, my great grandma. My dad was comfortable getting his because his mom always had them around.
Mm-hmm.
My grandma. She was comfortable having them all over her house because her mom did it. So who taught my great grandma how to keep these plants alive? I got a cutting from a plant of my great grandma's. I got it about 5 years ago. Got it from my grandma, who has her plant, her mom's plant. So my grandma has my great grandma's plant, and she gave me a cutting of it about 5 years ago, 4 years ago. And now I'm growing that plant.
Mm-hmm.
My great grandma was taught in one way or the other how to take care of that plant by someone who was just giving some advice. They had no idea all these years down the road, in part because of that information they gave to my great grandma, handed down to my grandma, my dad, and now me, posting it all over the internet that they didn't even know existed back then. They have no idea.
Yeah.
And what are we imparting on people right now that's going to be used to amplify, or is going to be used in a message amplified by technology in 50 years to change somebody else's life? It's
Right.
wild to kind of trace it back and see the massive ripple effect that just stupid things to have. I mean, and a lot of people will come to me and they talk about how, they want to create videos on social media and ideas. What do I need to do? What are the steps that I need to take? It doesn't matter. Like I said earlier, like the truest form of who you are and like the most valuable art form and whatever you contribute is exactly how you're going to do it without planning it out too much. Getting in your way, and it should, people think, well, it should look like this, and the cuts have to be this fast, and it needs to be this music, it needs to be on trend, it needs to use these hashtags, et cetera, et cetera. It's going to find the right people. It's not going to find everybody.
Yeah.
It's going to find the right people if you just do it how you would naturally do it if you were teaching your kid or if you were teaching a friend. Doesn't
Right.
matter. Just put it out there, and who knows, in 100 years, maybe something you taught to your kid that they then put on some new form of technology is going to help a whole bunch of other people. And if not, who cares? Again,
Yeah.
maybe they'll just watch the video when you're dead and it doesn't matter. But why not?
Right. There was the in Stranger Things, the most recent season. There was a song. Was it "Running Up That Hill"? Running up the hill. It was a song in the '80s, and it was a song that was created, 40 some odd years ago, and never was a major hit. It was just put out there. The singer, had this amazing song, and it was an amazing song the whole time. And then the producers at Stranger Things, or whoever it was, the creatives at Stranger Things, decided, hey, well, let's use that song. It's a great song. It's lesser known. We can get, I'm sure that was probably part of the conversation. It's lesser known. We can get the rights to it. You know what I mean?
Get it cheap.
Get it cheap. It's going to be easier to use than one of those, super popular 80s songs. And they put it in, and it was the top song on all media platforms for a period of months afterwards because of that. Something that was created. You think about even before the song was written, there were seeds planted by the songwriters. Someone sitting there at some point in time, years before the song was recorded and released, even was like, I've got this idea. And that's what's beautiful to me about content creation is that it starts with this point in time where someone's like, you know what? It'd be kind of a cool idea. What would that be? I don't know. Let's just do this. And it might not be something that seems so flashy. And this is something that with so many content creators I've spoken with, the videos that sometimes and often blow up are the things that they might not expect. It's like, oh, you know what? I had this idea. Like, yeah, just crossing the street, and then that becomes the thing that just goes viral, and the person's like, well, that changed my whole trajectory, and it is just this thing that they weren't anticipating, people wanted information about. Look at the whole TikTok movement of farriers, people that do horseshoeing. It became this huge thing on TikTok. And I'm not going to lie, I interviewed Brett Malpin, who is TikTok famous, and he's such a nice guy. But the stories that he had to share were so interesting, and people just consumed that. Why? Well, it's interesting, and it's oddly satisfying to watch, the process of a horse's hooves being trimmed. It was really satisfying, but that became this big thing on TikTok, and these guys didn't know.
My favorite part about that is, I know exactly what you're talking about because I've watched those videos as well.
Right?
I'll never shoe a horse. I never have shoed a horse. I have no plans of having a horse. I have no interest in horses, but I'll watch the video every time it comes up. There are so many videos. A horse farrier. I didn't know that was a term, horse farrier, which is funny because I grew up in I guess everyone just did it themselves. I grew up in a farming community, so everyone just did it themselves, I guess. So I never heard that term before, but I'm sure the guy is sitting there, doing the horseshoes and thinking, what, there's a thousand other of me out in the United States.
Yeah.
What good is it for me to put this video out? Doesn't matter. You're missing the point. It's interesting regardless.
Yeah.
An instructional video, it's not just for the people who actually want to do what you're doing. It's just it's interesting, and it's a way to expose yourself to other ideas, other cultures, just putting yourself in somebody else's shoes. And it's a very easy, entertaining way to do it, which is, I guess, why, social media can be so addicting. But it's just, it's interesting. And that's to my point earlier too, about just get out of your own way and do it. Because if this guy would have thought about it, oh, this is dumb. Who cares? Who cares about me shoeing a horse? How many people have horses to shoe in the first place? Not that many, but gosh, it sure is interesting.
And it's interesting in this way that there's this really other thing too with the farrier. He pointed out a really interesting point, and I absolutely love this. It's interesting in the way that we take it for granted as well. Like, a farrier used to be probably one of the most common jobs even in the US. The name Smith is very common. The person who would work there, the blacksmith, was the person who would often do that work at the same time. And it used to be like a mechanic, something that's everywhere. And these people release this information just because it's they want to preserve it. It's B, it's what they do, and they want to share the uniqueness of what they do. And some of the information, like, you take for granted, like, you might not think about it. So they wear the leather chaps, and but there was a special name for him that he said. I can't remember what he called them, but he pointed out there's one thing that's really important: you never use a pair of them that have a hole in it, because it's absolutely like the most dangerous thing in the world. Because if the horse's foot slips inside to that hole and it gets caught, you can get dragged, you can get in a lot of trouble. And so it's like, I was like, oh man, and even for someone who works in the profession, that's not knowledge that everyone knows. He was taught by some old timer, and so that used to be the way knowledge was transferred. The old timer who knew these techniques would transfer this knowledge to an apprentice. And I love that we are able to kind of like have apprentices across the entire planet, people that get access to this beautiful knowledge. And how much more beautiful if we had been able to preserve the knowledge from the generations before. We only have been able to preserve things through word of mouth. And as technology is advancing, just imagine the access to information that will be hopefully available to future generations. It's amazing.
I think about that kind of stuff all the time. What records have been lost of information that we should have known from so long ago. It's incredible. And you kind of just have to do your part, I guess, right? You're putting things out there. It's funny earlier that you mentioned about the videos that go viral are always the ones that, You don't anticipate. And I think that's the same for every creator.
Right.
If I've ever had a video, okay, this is the most recent example I'll just share. This is funny. Just on par, for social media and something that does well. I started to write out my video ideas for no other reason that I started to shoot on a higher quality camera, and there's just a little bit more, just to make the editing process more quick. What shots do I want? What are the loose lines that what am I going to be talking about from here through there? And I was doing it mostly because I was doing a skit. Back in high school, we had every year our history teacher would do, we would have to make important historical events, but do it as a newscast. And we would have commercials in between. So like Babe Ruth hitting his record home run, 9/11, Pearl Harbor, et cetera, et cetera. We'd have to figure out a way to like recreate these in some way. And I was doing that again on my own because that's really how I started making videos, was in high school doing that project. And so I wanted to recreate that now just because I can. It didn't have much to do with the content that I normally produce, but it's fun to do it anyway. I spent hours on that video. Probably 2 hours shooting it, another 2 hours editing it, which 4 hours for me is a lot for a video. Usually it's point and shoot and I'm done very quickly. I posted it and it didn't even reach 10,000 views. And I already had 1 million followers at that time on TikTok. I was already like 1.1 million followers. So that ratio is very low.
Yeah.
Tanked. And I was so frustrated. The next day, I was at the grocery store and I saw this big pyramid of lemons. And I was like, wow, that looks really interesting. There's something really visual about that. And next to this big pyramid of lemons were the little green pulled, where you pull the little tab off of there and you're supposed to use it to like secure your bag of fruit.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
So you fill a plastic bag full of fruit and they use this little twist tie to like secure it in there so they don't fall out. And I went up to that yellow pyramid of lemons and I just plucked one of those twist ties off. And then I put in the description, plant people get it. Because plant people use that to tie their plants onto their stakes.
Yeah.
That video that took me 10 seconds to produce is at about 8 million views right now. And I was just like, gosh, it was just a reminder to myself, like, don't get too caught up with it.
Yeah.
And it's so funny what people relate to. It wasn't that informational, but to your point about the videos that go viral, it's so funny, and it's just a good little reality check. Don't take yourself too seriously. I don't need to produce this big, long script. Just go for it, man. Just if you see it, point and shoot, go, enjoy your life.
It comes back to the journal, though. And this is where I love that because, if you're overthinking this, if you're putting in so much work that you are pulling yourself away from your inspiration, if you're pulling yourself away from what inspires you, in that moment, you saw something visually that inspired you, that kind of made something tick, and you went with it. And I think that this is so true for so much type of content. For my wife, when she makes a song, the simplest things are oftentimes the things that do the best. Music that just touches to where she's at and where people are at. And it doesn't have to be a big fancy video. It doesn't have to have all these crazy visuals. It just has to convey the emotion, has to convey where she's at. And then people relate to that more. We, for a long time, and I think this is what traditional media was grand. It was big. There were big sets. There were big, grand ways of producing things. There was do you watch the movie or the TV show Schitt's Creek?
I have, yeah.
Oh, I love Schitt's Creek. My God, it reminds me so much of my family. So it's absolutely dysfunctional. Not wealthy like that, but just the hilarious dysfunction. But there's one scene where um, this former actress mom is being cast in a commercial at this winery in season one. And she gets there, and the husband comes in, and he's a former, video producer, television producer, and he's walking around this small set, and he's like, does that ring light need some type of diffusion? And, and like, no, the ring light doesn't need the diffuser because it's already diffused. It's like they made it that way. He's bringing in
Yeah.
these concepts that are just like so much bigger than what is needed. And they're just like, no, we just need to talk to the camera. It's okay. We're all good. Or what type of lens are you using? Is this a prime? No, it's a zoom lens built into this camcorder. It's all in one. Do we need primes? Normally they use those for feature films. We don't really need a prime here today. And it's like we tend to, and for a long time, media has been very complicated, and that's one of the things that is there's simplicity that's coming into kind of media production, and I think that with that simplicity, people are turning toward honesty. And can you be honest with what you're creating? Is it honest to you? Because I think people like that.
I wrote about this not that long ago, how people are getting better and better at picking out the sale, knowing when they're being sold, knowing when something is not genuine. And that's because of social media, I think, largely. We're just inundated with it, and the more you're inundated with it, the more you're able to understand, oh, I'm being sold. This is verbiage used when someone's trying to sell me. This is energy that's being used when someone's trying to sell me. People understand it very, very well, and they don't like it. Nobody likes to be. The only people that like to be sold to are salesmen. That's because it's like a chess match with them. Oh, you think you're a better salesman than me?
Right.
Let's see what your sales techniques are. They're the only people that like being sold to.
Yeah.
And because of that, to your point, people enjoy that snippet of somebody's life, that honesty. Because as good as they are at sniffing out a sales pitch, and I'm not necessarily talking about someone selling a car.
Yeah.
Just anybody that's just trying to get you to watch a video is pitching a sale.
Yes.
And they're doing it, they're talking really loud, really fast, the quick cuts, the colors, the changes, everything.
Yeah.
And that is still, just because of the human brain, that can be addicting. But a lot of people will scroll right past that because they know that it's a sale already. Yeah. They see a very high quality video, maybe. And they're just like, I don't want this. I know if someone's making a high quality video with a really nice camera, I'm going past it because it's not, it's not the 12-year-old pulling a prank on his sister coming down the stairs, something like that. It's not a real life shot. It's not a genuine moment. It's not honesty. And people are craving that right now because everything around them is trying to get sold to, because the world runs on sales. Whether that's a car or a dishwasher or a house or food or getting to watch a TikTok video for 20 seconds.
Yep.
People want to break from that, and they want reality. They want the truth. They want honesty. And again, that's just another lesson of stick to what inspires you. Don't overthink it and go for it. Sometimes when a video tanks for me, it's almost like, I was talking about that one that took me 4 hours earlier, and then the contrast, the one that took me 10 seconds. It's a reminder to not worry about it, to not take yourself too seriously and to just go for it. But, sometimes I'll get these, it's just such a good reminder to just be honest and go for it and not have to worry about the production value or the camera quality or the lens. Does it zoom? Is it a prime lens? Et cetera, et cetera. Just recently, we had, I got a collaboration with this. It's not out yet, so I can't talk about it. Being posted on the 4th, January 4th. It's a big collaboration with a well-known company. and they're very corporate. They're very by the book, but this is their first campaign. They've never done a TikTok campaign before, a
Oh,
social media campaign at all. So even though they're so big, it's such a big brand, they've never sponsored posts like that. So they're pretty new to the scene. And this has happened before where they come to me and they're like, Tanner, I love your videos. We want you to make a video for us. Here's the idea. Do you have any ideas around what we're thinking? I send them the idea. I love it, they say. And then over the next, 2 or 3 months, they're constantly adding different things. It needs to be this. It needs to be that. Can you take this out? Can you add that? Can you put this music? Can we cut here? It needs to be this long. And I'm like, wait a second. I'm the one that knows how to do a video.
Yeah.
You came to me. You hired me to do this video. Just let me do it. And then I'm like, oh, I do that to myself. I overcomplicate things when the whole reason you got here in the first place, the whole reason you got to 1 million followers in the first place, was because you didn't overcomplicate things.
Mm-hmm.
Just produce, just go for it, just produce the content. And as upset as I was at this company for going back and forth with me all the time, it was another funny reminder. I'm basically playing, I was basically the bad guy. I was my own bad guy. Sometimes when you create so much content, you can get in your head and whatnot. But it's funny how things bring you back like that. And again, just seeking honesty, right?
Right. There was this great Casey Neistat video a couple of years ago, and I think it was a groundbreaking moment for me because I watched this whole video, and it's a great video on his channel. Still, you can go find it. Casey's they're using this giant drone that they built at a ski resort to pull them around on a snowboard. And the whole video is about them cruising around, getting dragged around on their snowboard by this massive drone. And it's like you're watching this like, this is unreal. This is amazing. And suddenly the video finishes and you're just like, dude, this is just ridiculous. Like what these guys are doing is ridiculous. Suddenly the video finishes and it's like, special thanks to Samsung. I was like, oh, what? That was an advertisement? I was blown away by it. I was like, that's unreal. And I was just like, it was the first time in my life that I was like, not aware that someone was selling something to me. And it wasn't even just a hard sale. It was just, we are associating ourselves with something that's interesting. And I was like, hey, bravo to a brand for trying something so creative. Bravo for Casey to pitch. I mean, can you imagine that pitch meeting? Hey, are you going to show any product? None. We're not going to show anything from you guys. There's got to be a phone in there, or camera or TV. No.
Flash the logo somewhere.
Yeah, we're just gonna have a great video, and at the end, we can say special thanks to you guys. Yeah, and I'm sure that there were executives that were like really pushing back against that. We need to have the traditional type of video where we're showing something.
Mm-hmm.
And I props off to Casey and his team for pushing back on. No, we don't. Just trust us. And then literally, I don't know how successful of a campaign it was. I don't know how much of that converted into sales. But for me, I had a shift in perspective on that brand. And, whether that's right or not, I shifted my perspective. Before how I felt to after. There's still like this respect, at least for the marketing department of that team, going, wow, really interesting. Because you're right. We have this meter going, or this alarm, ding, 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 ding. Whenever we start getting sold to, it pops on. And I think that people are becoming much more savvy consumers.
I love when people use, not even tactics, just showing you a good video and embedding the message or the brand in there somehow that's not right in your face. I can't remember. I know the creator. I know them by seeing them. I don't remember their name on TikTok.
No problem.
But they had a collaboration with, I believe it was Old Spice. It was Old Spice at the end, which they've had great advertising for
a long time.
15 years probably, when they started doing those Super Bowl commercials with the
Yep.
back at you, back at me, back at you,
Yeah.
back at me. That's when I remember Old Spice getting really good. And yes, I have a lot of respect for people that do that, but the whole video was this big mystery, um, a big story between him and his wife and something mysterious that was buried out in the backyard. And the very last shot is him lifting this like glowing box, like lifting the lid of this glowing box to reveal something. And even at the end, it didn't even show the product. It wasn't Old Spice product as soon as he did it. But then that very last cut was Old Spice. And you're like, yes, that, and I remember that. I don't remember all those other videos that were traditional, as you would say, traditional advertising, But I love when big marketing brands can say, I don't really care about your degree. If you have a marketing degree or advertisement specialists or whatever, you have the creative brain to this far have captured millions of people, and all of your videos are getting hundreds of thousands, millions of views. Do what you want.
Yeah.
We trust you. I have much more respect for those types of companies because they understand what social media is all about and how you can connect with an audience much more genuinely, much deeper by doing what comes naturally to you.
Yeah.
And I'll always respect those brands more and more. And, to this point, Old Spice has been doing a really good job, and that's kind of their MO anyway. But yeah, just another good on you, Old Spice, keeping up with what you've been doing so well for so long, and this creator for doing that. And, the few times that I've been allowed to just have free range, here's some money, we want it posted by this date. It can't have the competitors' products in it, but other than that, go for it. Try to keep it under a minute if you can. Those videos always do the best.
Yeah.
Every time I post a video, every time I'm going through the creative process with a brand and they want me to do this or that, and I know that it's just going to kill the video, I know it is. And I'll tell them that. I always warn them. I say, okay, I can do this, but it's going to tank the video. Yeah, we don't, it's just the standard. We don't mind. We want to get it out there, and it always tanks. And so there's something to it. And I'm really excited to see where these things go as we get further and further into, because social media is still so young.
Yeah. Right.
I mean, relatively speaking, in terms of advertising, it is so young. And I'm massively interested to see how this goes in the next 10, 20, 30 years. Gosh, I'm going to be some 80-year-old grandpa. I don't know if I'll be consuming so much social media at that point, but I'm massively interested to see where it goes and to see if a marketing degree is even worth it. Because who would you rather have?
Yeah.
Someone who just graduated from, I don't even know what the best marketing school is. Does Harvard have a good one? The Harvard of marketing. Would you rather have somebody with that degree, or would you rather have Mr. Beast?
Right.
Or Dude Perfect?
Right.
Who would you rather have? Someone who has a degree or someone who has the results? You want the results.
Yep. Exactly.
And giving credit to those creators who just went for it, because Mr. Beast doesn't have a degree in marketing, and neither does Dude Perfect, but they have the results, and you can respect that a lot more. I can respect that a lot more, and it's really neat to see brands respecting that a lot more too. I just think it's so neat how social media and just the culture of people can shift such big industries.
Right. Exactly. Well, brother, this has been a masterclass and so much. I really appreciate your time and coming on and sharing your knowledge today. Thank you so much, man.
Hey, it's been great for me too. I always enjoy chatting, with anybody that's like-minded or anybody that's interesting. Oh, I mean, it just kind of goes back to what we were talking about with social media. I want to get a peek into somebody else's life and learn more about them in a way that's not inflated, in a way that's not glamorized or anything. Just heck, and I guess it's morning time over there for you. So, gosh, I was just thinking, what a great way Not necessarily with me, but I was thinking, gosh, if I could talk to somebody like this every day to start my day in the morning, what a great way to go about it.
Right. And that's kind of what inspired me is everyone's like, what's your plan? What direction are you trying to take a podcast? I'm like, I don't know. I'm just finding people. Literally my process, I go through Instagram or TikTok or YouTube shorts, and I find people that are interesting to me. And then I reach out and see if they're willing to chat. And they're like, that's my process. And like, well, shouldn't you think more of this or that? I'm like, no, I want to continue to have conversations with people who are interesting to me. The rest, you know what? I'll leave the super famous people to Joe Rogan and things like that. I want people that interest me and to find out how they found this path, how they found out their journey and their calling, because and again, we don't know who's going to be, the next Dude Perfect, the next Mr. Beast. There are all of these people out there that have these interesting stories that we might assess value to later, but God, they've always had value. That's my point.
Mm-hmm.
They've always had value. And it's just our judgment call to say that, well, now they're interesting. No, they were always interesting. You're just waking up to it.
They just needed to tell their story.
Exactly.
I hope you find that truck driver that goes from Washington to Florida or wherever and get them on the podcast or something like that.
Right.
I've always been really interested too about when you're at the airport and you see people that are sleeping there or spending the night. There's a podcast idea.
Right.
Hey, what are you doing here?
If I had an unlimited budget, what I would do for my podcast, this is what I'd love to do: interview people and then fly to where they're at and film the video about what they do and how they do it. That to me would be absolutely interesting, to go and see people creating, to go and follow in their day in their lives. It's kind of like micro dirty jobs, but just for whatever interesting person I find. If they're a songwriter, go watch them be a songwriter for a day. If they're doing TikTok videos, go and watch how they do that and find the inspiration. That to me is super inspiring. And that's kind of my vision for long term, but we'll see. We'll see what the universe brings.
Yeah. I hope you get to do that someday. That would be very, very interesting. It's neat to hear all these ideas that I've had that somebody else feels the same way about it and feels just regular people are super, super interesting and have important stories to tell and important things to highlight and hand down. And yeah, it's pretty interesting where we're at in this world. And I want to know about it.
As do I.